On this edition of ATV Special Broadcast, former D.C. School Chancellor Rhee stops by to discuss her controversial tenure as head of D.C. public schools and her new mission. After a sweeping defeat in the 2008 congressional elections, two-term Democratic Congressman Jim Himes discusses what life is like in the minority and how he was able to maintain his seat in a wave election.
I'm Nicole Pulley.
I'm Anthony Martinez.
This is ATV Special Broadcast.
For the last 18 years, Rhee has made education her life passion. But in recent years, Rhee has become a controversial figure as she attempted to reform the D.C. public schools. After the voters of D.C. spoke in the recent 2008 elections, Rhee found herself without a job. While many mayors and governors called upon Rhee to reform their school systems, Rhee decided to follow an unconventional path, creating a lobbying organization intent on defending the interests of children. As a member of Teach for America, Rhee began teaching at Harlem Park Community School in Baltimore, Maryland in 1992. It was there that she realized teachers were the most powerful driving force behind student achievement.
My advice for people who are just starting to teach through a program like Teach for America is hang in there. The first year of teaching is the hardest year that you could ever have. And for everything that I've done in my 20-some-odd year career, I can honestly say that there was nothing tougher than my first year of teaching. Just trying to understand the craft, to understand the kids and the environments, and sort of, fumbling through all of the sort of professional challenges that you face as a first-year teacher are tremendous. And so my advice to those folks would be stick it out. By spring break, things will, be much, much better. And then by your second year, you can really begin to see the impact that you're having on kids.
You actually ate a B in your first year, trying to get the class under control.
Yeah.
Any recommendation for teachers?
I probably would not recommend eating bees, but it was, it was a product of me being extraordinarily frustrated. I was trying to teach a lesson that I thought was a great lesson, and a bee flew into the classroom and was flying around, and the kids were screaming and yelling, "A bee, a bee, a bee!" And they're jumping on the chairs and they're jumping on the desks, and they're completely not paying attention to me. So finally, when the bee landed, I had my lesson plan in my hand. I rolled it up and I smacked it, and I flicked it in my hand. I didn't know what to do with it, so I ate it. It was just a gut thing. And the kids were like, "Oh, that's so nasty." But then they sort of, from that point on said, "Well, she's a little crazy. We never know exactly what she's going to do." And so it did help with classroom management a little bit.
In June 2007, D.C. Mayor Adrian Fenty appointed Rhee as Chancellor of the District of Columbia's public school system, a school district serving more than 47,000 students in 123 schools. The district had gone through 7 chancellors in just 10 years. Once as Chancellor, Rhee quickly announced plans to close almost 24 schools, cut the central office administration in half, and proposed a new contract for teachers that would dramatically increase their salaries if they abandoned the tenure system. But 3.5 years later, Mayor Fenty would lose his bid for re-election, and Rhee would resign. You have said publicly that you believe that he lost due to the policies that you enacted.
Yes.
And you said that you thought that he would win re-election because you thought that the voters would see progress that you made. Why do you think that residents of the District of Columbia didn't see that progress and didn't re-elect Fenty?
Yeah. Well, the progress was undeniable, right? So we went from being the lowest performing school district in the country on the NAEP examination, which is the National Gold Standard Assessment, to being the jurisdiction that was leading the nation in gains after just 2 years. So we led the nation in gains in both reading and math at both the 4th and 8th grade level. We were the only jurisdiction in which every single subgroup of children improved their academic standing. We made more progress on the DC CAS in a 3-year time period than had been made in more than 10 years before then. So the progress was really undeniable. And to your point, I really thought that at the end of the day, that is what would drive people's decisions. What I think we did not do a good job of is sort of connecting the dots for people. So and hindsight is 20/20, but right now I've looked at a lot of the data, and it's interesting because record numbers of people even at around the election time, felt confident and positive about the direction that the school district was heading in. Right? So that's a very good thing. But when asked, do you think that, for example, it was necessary to fire the teachers to see the improvements, people said no. And so what that said to me was that people didn't understand that all of the actions that we were taking that were somewhat tumultuous and did cause some conflict were all for a reason, because we knew that we had to take those actions in order to create better school environments and create better academic programs for kids. And so I think that was a shortcoming on our side, that we didn't connect all of those dots for folks.
And as you said, hindsight is 20/20. Besides not connecting the dots, is there anything else that you would have done differently? I remember in the Newsweek article, you said you wish you had brought parents along. Some outside critics said you moved too quickly and made too many changes rapidly.
I don't have any regrets on that front. Through my 3.5 years here, people often said to me, you're moving too quick, you need to slow down. And what I would tell you is that none of the people who told me that had children in the DC public schools, right? I had my kids in the school system. They are still in the DC public schools. And as a parent, I can tell you that, I couldn't look another mother in the eye and say, you know what, just be patient, even though your child's school is not so good. In 5 years, we think it's going to get better. That doesn't make any sense to that parent. She can't wait, right? Your kid is only in first grade one time. They're either going to learn how to read or they're not. And they don't want to hear about what's going to happen 10 years from now. They want to know that their children's education is improving today. And so that's why we moved as fast as we did, because we were in an environment with a vast majority of kids were not on grade level. We're not, we're not getting the education that they needed, and our kids deserve better.
What would you have done to incorporate parents more into the system?
It's a good question. I mean, we, I think, arguably had more community meetings and I had more office hours than almost any other superintendent I know. I mean, we were constantly out. But for all of the efforts that we put forth, we didn't maybe implement the exact right strategies. I still believe that it is possible to do that. I think that the new administration, has learned a lot of lessons from what we did right and what we did wrong, and hopefully they'll be able to build on that. So we tried out lots of different things. I think some of those things worked and then others didn't. But I think just sort of constantly looking and monitoring to see what things are having the most impact, and then kind of modifying your strategy from there is the most important thing.
Last year, Michelle Rhee's work as chancellor was spotlighted in a documentary film, Waiting for Superman. The film looked at the failures of American public education. With spending on American schools having doubled in the last 30 years, the quality of education has not improved. U.S. students are still lagging behind students of other industrialized nations. Among 30 developed countries, the U.S. is currently 21st in science, 23rd in reading, and 25th in math. My generation will be the first generation of Americans who are less educated than their parents.
Correct.
Why is that? What is at the core of this problem?
It's that the American public education system is failing a huge number of kids every single day. We are falling further and further behind. We used to be, at the top of the list of nations, of developed nations across the globe in terms of kids graduating from high school, going to college, et cetera, and now we're falling to the middle of the pack, and unless we pivot and change what we're doing, I think we're going to continue to fall further and further behind.
Why do you think what changed? What happened that we went from the head of the pack to falling behind?
I don't think there's one thing that you can point to. I think there are lots of things that have happened over the last 30 years. I think the nature of schools has changed significantly, right? It used to be that you could track kids, and some kids were going to be CEOs and scholars, and other kids were going to be accountants and sort of clerical people, and some kids were going to go work in factories, and everyone, there were jobs for everyone, and you could make a good living and livelihood based on lots of different trajectories. Now that's increasingly not the case, right? So we will, over the next 20 years, have 123 million high-skill, high-paid jobs in this country. But at the rate that American students are progressing, our kids are only going to be able to fill 50 million of those 123 million jobs, which means the rest of those 70 million are going to be outsourced, right, to kids in India and China and other countries where they are gaining the skills that they need to be successful. So I think part of the problem is that we have not evolved our school system with the changing times. We're still working on the agrarian calendar for, you know, when our kids go to school, right? Yeah. I mean, if we can't change the fundamental things like that, then we aren't going to be able to keep up.
Upon her departure from D.C. public schools, Rhee decided to create a non-for-profit, Students First. The mission of Students First is to build a national movement to defend the interests of children in public education and pursue transformative reform. Its intent is to be a grassroots movement designed to mobilize parents, teachers, students, administrators, and citizens throughout the country.
We are getting people to have conversations with their neighbors, with their families, with their friends. So for example, AU is hosting a Waiting for Superman screening today. We're going to have a discussion about it afterwards. We are actually encouraging our members, and we have over 170,000 members so far. We're encouraging them to host viewing parties in their home, to watch the movie and then have discussions afterwards. And then we're going to give people a really clear call to action. So last week, we just launched a nationwide campaign called Save Great Teachers. And the point of this is that we're going to be seeing massive budget cuts across the country, specifically to education. We're going to be laying teachers off in almost every state in the union. And the problem is that the way that we lay teachers off in this country makes absolutely no sense. It's something called the last in, first out policy. And it means that the newest teachers, the youngest teachers, are the ones to go regardless of how good they are. So what we have set up on our website is that people can go online, they can click on the state that they live in, and then we give them a list of action items to take that will help them change the laws in their particular community. And so I think that when you give people a specific call to action, you're going to generate more interest.
To find out more about Students First, you can visit the website www.studentsfirst.org. And you can visit our website, specialbroadcast.auatv.com, to hear Michelle Rhee's surprising opinion on unions. We'll be right back. Coming up next, Nicole Pole sits down with Democratic Congressman Jim Himes.